Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interview Maya Markovich, VP at the American Arbitration Association and Executive Director of the JusticeTech Association, whose work bridges technology, law, and social impact to democratize access to justice. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm really excited today to have Maya Markovich on. She is the Vice President at the American Arbitration Association. This is a new position she has that I'm looking forward to asking her about that. And also the Executive Director of JTA, the Justice Tech Association. And that one is close to my heart. I love what she's doing with that and want to learn a lot more about that. But to introduce you, Maya, if you could just tell us a little bit about what you're up to now, and then we'll get started.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. I am a big fan, so it's very exciting for me to be here. And it's good to see you too. I am, yeah, as of just a few weeks ago, started as Vice President of the American Arbitration Association's Institute, which is the thought leadership and research arm of the AAA. And I'm also continuing as the executive director and co-founder of the JusticeTech Association.
Wow, Institute. Okay, I get it now. um, yeah, a lot of brains to bring to bear on that. There's a lot of important insight. I know I love what has been going on in terms of bringing AI into arbitration and amazing people.
It's great. I mean, I was explaining to somebody the other day that it really is kind of the logical expansion of my career interests, as just widening the aperture on how we think about dispute resolution and the legal system. So I'm very, very fortunate to be there. I'm very happy.
Well, awesome. I think that is really a big unknown for lawyers right now. Like, I think that they're not looking too far beyond the worry, which is a reasonable one about AI replacing us and all that. But the vision about what comes after is the thing that I think is really important to keep in mind. That there is a positive view of incorporating technology into the law where there's still a future for lawyers. And
Yeah.
yeah, and you're working on it. You're working in the future.
Yes.
So, as I shared with you before we got started, is that I like to learn about where people started, like where they grew up, where they came from, what were the roots of the genesis of your interest in all this good stuff. And let's just start there. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Silicon Valley. Industry exploded around us. It's always sort of been there. It never was foreign or unknown to me as a concept for improving the way, things can be done. I spent most of my life in California with some years abroad. Gosh, it was middle school, kindergarten and middle school in France, and then I went to school on the East Coast for a year, and then went to study abroad again in Russia, and then I came back to the Bay Area and spent the rest of my educational career here in the Bay at Stanford, as well as UC Law SF, which is formerly Hastings in San Francisco.
Wow, that must have been an amazing childhood with all of those different influences and experiences. If I may ask, like, what kind of work did your parents do?
Oh, they were both educators. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and my dad was a geology professor.
Geology professor.
Yeah. So
What
we had a lot of time together in the summers. That's one of the reasons we moved around.
did you go hiking together and you'd point out like different
Oh
types of rocks
yeah.
and stuff?
Oh yeah. It's the best. He's 93 now and we still talk about it. Yeah, when we would go skiing together, he would just sort of, on the chairlifts, he would explain, what the glaciers had done around us, and Yeah, we'd pull over on the side of the road and kind of like hammer at cliffs and stuff like that. It was awesome.
Wow. Like there's this, I forget her name, but she's on TikTok and she's a geologist and she just like walks around just random places pointing out different types of rock and what they are and how they originated. And like,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
One thing I learned from him, actually, one of the biggest things I learned from my dad is that it's possible to never be bored. Because he could just sit somewhere incredibly, incredibly boring, and just as long as it was outside, he could just be sort of thinking about the natural environment around him and wondering and kind of identifying minerals and stuff. So it's great. Yeah.
and I imagine, the early influences from your mom too, that she was probably spectacular in terms of what better than to have somebody who's able to teach you and be there as a guide in your own, educational journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, of course. I mean, yeah, yes, she was very formative in my life, and as well as, I mean, so two educators had three kids, and we all went to law school. So I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, so well, let's try to unpack it a little bit. Like you went to Stanford undergrad, you majored in psychology, right?
Yeah,
And then you also get a master's in psychology.
yeah.
So I'm encouraged by that, by the way, personally, because my older daughter Julia is going to she's getting her psychology degree and she's going to get a master's in psychology. So um,
Oh, that's great. I mean, I loved it so much. To this day, people ask me, "Oh, why didn't you continue in psychology?" And I'm like, I never quit. Using psychology, I use it every day. I'm
yeah,
using it right now,
yeah,
so
I'm figuring you out right now. I got your number, and I think I shared with you before. My younger daughter, actually, her name is Maya. Um,
Oh, I didn't know that
so
actually. That's
lovely
so
name.
cool.
Okay, so psychology, and so what happened there? So like you majored and then got a master's in psychology. So how did the turn to Hastings come about?
The thing I loved the most about psychology was how broad it was,
Hmm.
honestly, and how I could just learn so much about different aspects of human behavior. I learned a lot about, behavioral economics, the way people make decisions, how groups influence each individual in the group, how decisions are made, all that kind of cool stuff. And that's what I went on to do with my master's. And then when I was trying to decide whether to go on for a PhD, I realized that you'd have to really focus in on something very, very, very small and kind of focus your entire attention on one aspect of it. And I wanted to do something broader, and so that led me into change management consulting in tech instead, because of course you need to know how people resist change and why, and how do you get people over those hurdles, for kind of long-term muscle memory, and thinking about ways to, constantly thinking about different ways to do things, which actually, to be honest with you, really started when I was working in, my advisor in, at Stanford was, Philip Zimbardo, he was my professor and mentor, and he was my graduate advisor. And everyone knows him for the Stanford prison experiment. But
Yeah, that was him.
yeah,
Okay.
that was him. That was him. But I mean, his work on social influence and persuasion, organizational dynamics, behavior change, resistance to that change, and how those factors play out in the human interaction, to me, was really, really fascinating and inspiring. And he really taught me how to recognize human patterns and drivers, and constantly be querying not only my own assumptions but really everything about a given situation, and kind of proactively question the status quo. So because of that, I was
Wow.
kind of already of that mindset, I think, before I even left school.
Actually, that first, I think it was like your first professional job after law school.
Yeah.
That really caught my eye because when I was reviewing things to interview you, it it's a position for change management at Oracle.
Yeah.
And like everything that you're saying, I mean, even growing up in the roots of Silicon Valley and like just probably asthmatically, getting a lot of that, um,
Right.
exposure to the tech world and everything. It sounds like, the ground in which you grew is perfect for this moment. And
It turned out that way.
yeah,
I
because
wouldn't say it was planned, but
because change management is the thing that is on people's minds right now.
I hope so. I hope they're increasingly realizing the importance of it.
Wow. Well, separately, I would love to talk with you about that because that's just sounds like you have a well of wisdom on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love it. It really is all about the people side of things. I think a lot of times people are, I mean, you see it in cycles. People really kind of rushing to the solution rather than figuring out how you actually make the solution something that becomes a habit, um, and is welcomed rather than resisted. Yeah, we got to do it.
It definitely pays dividends to work on that and get a lot more people on board that can help. Okay, so that was your first step into that, and then you worked at a few different law firms, didn't you?
Yeah, no. So actually, I did that before I went to law school, and then that was great. I learned a huge amount about corporate America, in addition to everything else. And I think, by the way, on that note, I think it's really important to realize that I think this is something that's missing from the calculus in many kind of conversations about industry transformation, is understanding that change management is and behavioral economics are really they are their own discipline. And I see a lot of organizations, in the legal industry where I am mostly, um, just jumping to, yeah, we need some change help, we need some help with the change, and just like just basically appointing somebody to be that person without realizing that there's an entire discipline and an entire industry of people that are very well trained, and are and specialize in that. And
Mm,
I'm personally of the opinion that, you got to have the people that are responsible for the adoption, transformation, change in from the very beginning. The earlier you bring them in, the better. Because, even, in the design phase is ideal. Because you're not going to build yourself into something that is very difficult to sell or adopt,
yeah.
uh, so anyway, I just wanted to make sure to mention a lot of what I see is a recognition that change management is important, but not an understanding that specialists need to be involved. And you can't just appoint somebody to be, that person without any understanding of what it actually means, because it's setting them and the project up for failure. That's an aside. Anyway, so
No, that's some good meaty stuff there. So let's go a little deeper then. So when you were doing that change management through Oracle, like what if you could share one example of that, like one challenge that you faced and how you tackled it?
Oh, sure. I mean, like we worked on big clients, and big institutional clients. And so, I mean, generally speaking, what I would do is I would be part of this advanced team that would come in and do, change readiness assessments. So one of the main things we would do is interview everybody from the C-suite all the way down to the mailroom, and figure out how they currently operate, how, what their blockers are, what keeps them up at night, what do they hope to see, what are they afraid of, what freaks them out about, these concepts, or in general about their careers. And from there, we would develop long-term implementation plans. So, that was focused really on, like I was saying, the muscle memory. It wasn't just a short-term implementation of a big database and move on. It was really, how do you ensure that implementation remains successful 6 months, 2 years, 5 years after the team is gone? That was one of the main things we did. And then we would kind of leave that implementation plan with the rest of our team, which would come in and actually do the thing.
Mm,
So, I mean, a lot of it was around, people. Change is hard for people. It's difficult for people to, wrap their minds around. There's a lot of reasons why people just, don't want to do it. People are worried about their jobs. They're worried about, what they've carved out for themselves, how they're going to be valuable in kind of the new reality, and that kind of thing. And understanding that people side is something that is, really critical to get a handle on from the beginning. And of course, the culture of the organization is going to have a big deal a great deal to do with it as well. So you can't really, I mean, there are certain, of course, there are best practices and whatnot, but you really don't, you don't get into the meat of it until you really are dealing with the team members themselves one on one.
Do you remember an experience that you had with somebody who was just like, this is the way I've been doing it for years. I really don't see the value in what you're talking about. I mean, I'm already doing that. Like, what is there really to gain from this change? And how do you even respond to that?
Well, I mean, that's something we pretty much hear every day now, right? It's not, you don't have
Hmm.
to reach way back for that. Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's almost a master class in like how do you really get to, effective transformation? And a lot
Yeah.
of it has to do with pointing out the things that are not going to change, finding the people that will do the kind of championing on your behalf.
Yeah.
The ones that, finding those kind of planting those flags of kind of innovative thought around the organization wherever you can, and then disseminating information and keeping momentum like through that network.
I would imagine that allyship in the sense that there might be people that that person knows that they trust that can be influential to opening their mind to the new thing, and then
Yeah,
maybe also putting incentives in place that make it worthwhile for them.
absolutely. Love the incentives. Yes. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do that too. I mean, there's
Yeah.
everything from gamifying it to really simply just listening to folks. Um, Again, a lot of it depends on the culture and on the transformation that you're trying to achieve.
After that, I see that,
Yeah.
you did a few things as a product manager.
No, so I did that. Then I went to law school. I really wanted to, basically, I went to law school because I wanted to have a bigger megaphone to have positive social impact. And I
Okay.
thought that the law degree would help me do that. Uh, so I did that. I practiced law for several years. I was always kind of, I was always kind of, as the junior attorney, I was always kind of being pushed towards the tech.
Mm.
I very quickly began to realize it was, going to be the way that the industry would have to go, but that it was going to be really difficult, right? And at the same time, technology really has, it became pretty obvious to me that it has the opportunity to be an equitable access to justice issue. Can lead, if it's done the right way, it can lead to happier lawyers, happier clients, lower risk, better results, like all that stuff. But around that time, I also realized I didn't really want to be a partner at a law firm. And so I just wanted to do something broader and more creative with
Mm.
my time. So, and I was also, had a new, very small children, and it really became, my partner and I decided that we really just wanted to make kind of big life decisions that were going to not involve the amount of time away from our family as being a partner would have mandated. So I moved over to the product management roles in various legal tech companies, and that was voice of the customer input. It was requirements analysis, launches of new versions of the products, and a lot of I learned a lot about product management as a non-engineer really quickly. Yeah, so I did that for a while, and then for many years, and then Nextlaw Labs found me just as it was getting off the ground, and I just immediately recognized an opportunity to bring together a lot of the threads of my experience in a totally new way.
And I think that's where we've like I first came to know you was at Nextlaw Labs,
Yeah.
and to me, especially at that time, it was so different and so interesting to merge those two worlds.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, especially in a way that was looking not only at the law and tech, but also from like a financial standpoint. Like, how do we
Hmm.
work this to make it something that incentivizes people to do it? Um,
There was a lot of that. There was definitely a lot of change management. I mean, it was the first tech-focused innovation catalyst that was ever founded by a law firm back in 2015. So when we started, we basically were like, okay, we have this thing. How are we going to affect change?
Mm.
And we ended up deciding that we would go to market in three different ways. One was investing in legal tech companies, of which there were 70 when we founded Nextlaw Labs, that were self-described as legal tech companies. So we were going to either invest in companies, collaborate with clients, or co-develop. So we
Mm.
did some of all three. We very quickly realized that we could have a lot of impact on the industry by investing because we ourselves didn't have we didn't have our own dev team at Nextlaw Labs. And so we started Nextlaw Ventures as well. And we vetted about, well, over 500 legal tech companies. 6 years
Wow.
later, there's like 3,000, 4,000, whatever legal tech companies, right? So
Yeah.
we were just in the right place at the right time, and it was the very first venture fund that was ever focused on exclusively on legal tech. So we were kind of the only game in town there. So we we vetted a lot of companies, built a portfolio, and then I started working with startups, with them, accelerating them both internally at Denton's and also at externally in the market.
So one thing that I want to ask you about, so we can go forward with like how things played out and stuff, but the why though strikes me about your focus on wanting to do this from the viewpoint of helping people, like affecting positive change in the world. Like where does that come from? Like not, unfortunately, not everyone has that focus, and sometimes it's just about, this is a great place to build a company, make a lot of money. Like what,
Oh
where did
yeah.
that motivation come from for you?
Hmm. I mean, I was always kind of geared that way.
Mm.
In high school, I was very, active, politically active, and really, helped organize Earth Day at our high school, and
Yeah.
spent a lot of time volunteering. And I mean, basically, I think I'm just sort of wired that way. I love it, right? I enjoy it, and I like thinking about ways that I can be productively, supporting improvement, in people's lives or whatever it might be. I took the first semester off of college actually to work for a political campaign, and then after that, I've always been doing as much pro bono as possible. And I'm on, various boards of nonprofits that are all kind of pushing in the same direction. But I really see it as, to me, it's all connected. I really see it as something where you you affect positive change over here, and ultimately, it's all the people that are working to do something like this, effectively all working for the same larger goal. And plus, I really enjoy being around other people that feel the same way. So, I was on the board of the pro bono arm of the Alameda County Bar Association here in Oakland. And and that was, they kind of brought me on as a kind of person that knows about tech, but really it was, for me, it was incredibly illuminating as to like all the activity that's going on, and understanding that it's a really broad network of types of approaches that, when you're talking about access to justice, especially, so all these different ways to make a dent in it, and actually we're never going to be able to make a dent in it unless we all are working together from all these different angles. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, 100% for me too. I think up until the maybe 2, 3 years ago, it was a fairly small community. Like we all know each other and learn from from each other and sometimes work on projects together. But yeah, there's definitely been an explosion in interest in this little niche that we call legal tech and now justice tech. If you can give like a little bit of I guess, a definition of what justice tech is, how it relates to access to justice, and
Yeah,
what you're working on with that.
I couldn't be more happy to give that. So I mean, this is obviously something not going to be news to you or many of your listeners, but the access to justice crisis is overwhelming. We'll just start there. In the US, the very well cited statistic of 92% of people can't get justice for everyday problems. They're excluded from the opportunities that the law provides. And within those numbers, there's racial and socioeconomic disparity that pervades the justice system, where the wealthy have easy access to their constitutional rights, and the rest are really left to fend for themselves. That leads to very unjust outcomes and overrepresentation of those without access to legal services in the legal system. So, and the other thing is, of course, the criminal and civil justice systems feed into each other. So you can start
Mm.
off with an unpaid fine that can lead to, crushing debt, criminal liability. You can also be waiting for public representation for a criminal offense for years. That can help, prevent somebody from dealing with life-changing personal issues like maintaining housing or financial stability, or custody of their children. And so the ripple effect really extends beyond the individuals to families and communities and entire demographics. So you add to that the fact that, 120 million people every year are going pro se through the civil legal system in the US. Uh,
120 million?
yeah,
Wow.
every year. It's between 75 and 95%, depending on the type of case. So in bankruptcy and eviction, it's 90 up to 95%. In other types of, anyway, it's terrible, right? It's like
Wow. Yeah.
an atrocity. And the US is 107 out of 142 countries on affordability of access to legal support, according to the World Justice Project last year. So the legal system is really designed for lawyers to run as a business. It's not for public benefit. And pro bono services and legal aid organizations are doing incredible work. They're under resourced, they're overwhelmed. And so we believe that technology really, that's created by and in partnership with those that are affected, which is what we call JusticeTech, can and should be a critical component of the effort to democratize justice. It'll never be the whole solution, but it'll be some. We can't get there, especially now with all the opportunities that technology is offering for scaling impact. We can't afford to leave it out of the equation.
So one detail I want to ask you about is, lawyers are very finicky when it comes to definitions and words that we use and language and stuff, which makes sense because that's what lawyers do.
Yeah.
Um, but why the choice of justice tech versus access to justice?
You mean as a terminology?
Yeah, like in terms of, because I mean, just to telegraph that I see it as kind of like a reframing of the concept so that what people have found self-limiting in thinking of things as access to justice problems, hopefully would open their minds to looking beyond that by thinking of it as a justice tech uh,
Mm.
solution.
I mean, that's a great point because I mean, I see it a bit as a kind of a pipeline. So I mean, there's the big access to justice gap, and
Mhm.
we think that technology that is thoughtfully and built and ethically built to address the access to justice gap by kind of pinpointing different areas where it can be streamlined and scaled is one of the many ways that we can shrink the access to justice gap. But there are others, right? I mean, we've also got community justice workers. We've got, obviously, we've got, incredible work going on at legal aid organizations like, Legal Aid of North Carolina's Innovation Lab. Universities too are working on this stuff. I mean, so we just don't want to be like. That's the one thing I think I take away from being part of having grown up here in Silicon Valley is like a healthy skepticism of the people that just think that tech is gonna just solve all the problems, because in many ways it can create, it can exacerbate problems and create even worse ones.
Mhm.
So we that's why we're saying it's one way of adopting it. Now, does it bring in an entire group, an entirely new group of people who are interested in solving problems with technology, of disrupting antiquated systems, of being an entrepreneur, or someone, most importantly, someone who has had lived experience with the problem they're trying to solve, and hence has connections with their community, to know how to build something that will actually improve the lives of people that they see themselves in, is an incredibly powerful new way, for sure, of dealing with how we can again, just like all work together and even just chip away a little bit at the access to justice crisis, because it's something that, I mean, side note, but I don't want to get into it because it's like a philosophical over a beer conversation. But even access to justice itself,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really that's not really the right term. It's more like access to the opportunity to. It's not you're not guaranteed justice. You're simply trying to level the playing field
Right.
so that you can, So yeah. So I think I'm seeing, I mean, I realized when I worked at Next Law Labs and Next Law Ventures that I really loved working with entrepreneurs and early stage startups. Um, it's just, I find I find it profoundly inspiring to work with people who are dedicating themselves to something completely. And all the more so, of course, when it's mission driven. So that's how Justice Tech Association really came about, is because I realized that we needed collective platform for the kind to advocate for the kind of reform and clearing of roadblocks that are really needed for these entrepreneurs to really make the change that they envision that their
Mm.
product can and will do.
Yeah. Make the change in the world you want to be.
That's right.
Right. And and by the way, earlier, like I'm a big fan of philosophizing over a beer. That's something I'll have to
Okay,
do.
you're
Um,
on.
maybe next time.
It
Um,
won't be long before I see you in person, I'm sure.
it'll be on me. So then, like, let's talk about the specifics a little bit more with JTA, with Justice Tech Association. How many members are there? What is the mission? What are you like? What are some concrete steps that you've taken so far
Oh,
in
sure.
in that mission?
Yeah. So we were founded 3 years ago. We just had our third anniversary. And
Congrats.
yay, I know. It's really cool. And we were founded with a few founding members. So they are all entrepreneurs and founders of Justice Tech companies themselves. And it was founded to provide, what we do is provide early stage and ongoing support for the companies that are building technology that opens access to legal rights or improves outcomes and increases equity for those that are impacted by the legal system.
Erin Levine, right, is one of your founding
Yep.
members. Yeah,
Yes.
and she's amazing with everything she's doing and hella
I
doing.
know.
Yeah. What is the next step? Like what are like what's something you have on the radar for Justice Tech Association that you're looking to implement maybe in the next couple years?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I forgot to I forgot to answer the second part of your question, which is kind of the stuff that we have been doing and plan to continue doing and kind of level up.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we've been doing is a Justice Tech Accelerator in conjunction with UC Law SF, formerly Hastings, my alma mater, and that's part of their Lex Lab program. So we run a cohort there on an annual basis of Justice Tech companies. We do that in conjunction with Village Capital, Dream.org, Generator, and potentially some new ones coming on this year. And that's a concrete way that we can, as JTA is an entirely volunteer driven organization. So the way that we can provide impact is by setting situations up where we can provide this kind of support and enablement. So we've got that going, and it's been really successful, and I've been really happy to see where the graduates have gone, and many of them are JTA members. Then, there's also we have a monthly member forum on topics that we have identified that are really important to the growth of our
Mm.
membership. We've got about 30 members, somewhere between 30 and 40. We're doing renewals right now, so we'll see. Once they're members, they have access to a whole slew of excellent benefits. And we know they're good because we actually do pretty extensive member outreach to connect with them and find out, what are they running up against now? How can we be more useful? So they have discounts to services. They get free mentoring. They have access to discount limited edition access to things like the Dream Entrepreneurs Network content. all kinds of stuff. It's always people are really actually come to us. None of that has been outbound. People have come to us and said, we'd like to support your members in some way. Can we contribute with our expertise? So there's a lot of that. And then we also, of course, the community itself is a big deal. Many of them come and are just like, oh God, I thought I was just out there trying to survive all by myself. Turns out that everybody in this Slack channel knows my pain and is incredibly supportive and willing to share. So we also do warm introductions to investors, and a humbling advisory board that is also kind of an open door for our members to connect with. One of the things that they said they really wanted was an in-person convening. So we will be doing that in April down in Tucson, and that's going to be our first opportunity to have get members together all at once in a room. We've got a really cool agenda. We hopefully got some merch that we're going to be able to have, be able to represent. And people, our members are very proud to be part of JTA, and they also have to abide by a code of ethics that we've put a lot of thought into to make sure that obviously it's opt-in, but they need to essentially demonstrate that they are at all times prioritizing consumer benefit, mitigating consumer harm, being very careful with the consumer data, operating at the highest levels of ethical business operations at all times. A lot of that has I think engendered interest from the outside of folks that can be skeptical of those things, but actually are relieved to see that there's at least some sort of vetting procedure in place. And so as a result, everyone is a like-minded individual that's just out there trying to fix the world in their one way that they know very well, but are able to leverage, the hive mind.
I think it's a wonderful initiative. I think the fact that you're hitting it from so many dimensions, right? From support from colleagues, that feeling of camaraderie, but also from mentorship perspective, and offering education and support, and even connecting them with potential investors, and having a rule, like a code of ethics, extremely important, not only for them to do the right thing from a best practices standpoint, but also from people that are looking to that type of solution to feel confident about putting their interests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually, and in addition, it's also extremely important to investors that are looking to kind of expand the type of positive impact they can have on a particular community, to really see that the mission focus is unwavering.
Well, let me ask you really quick about that. I don't want to spend too much time on this question, but has the climate changed in terms of investors investing in Justice Tech?
It's interesting. I actually I talked to a few. This is anecdotal. This is not like a survey or anything with data, but I've talked to a few companies, of our member companies, and what's interesting to them is they're like, not really. It's as hard as it's ever been. And I think part of it is because they're so used to pushing upstream that
Mm.
it's when the going gets tough in terms of money, it's just that's their that's their reality anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's the resilience is something that I really see a lot. And they're just like, yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's always been hard, especially if it's that's kind of that's the opportunity and the challenge of JusticeTech, is that many of the companies are founded by people who have lived experience with the problem. And as a result, they're often from underrepresented groups because of who who is affected by the lack of access to justice. So
Yeah.
as a result of that, they are only getting, and no, 2% is generous in terms of the amount of funding that is provided to those groups. So, they're already dealing with a very small deal, part of the pie. I think a lot of the challenge for them right now, specifically with Justice Tech, is that it's still something where, you and I in our world, Like, you don't have to explain what the magnitude of the problem or why it is a problem, right? Why it's not just the way it is, and who needs to worry about it. When you get in front of somebody that really has never thought about this before and has no lived experience, they can spend a lot of time on the education part of things
Mm.
and really explaining kind of what I did with, kind of running through some statistics, explaining, but then, then people want to dive deeper and, what about this? What about that? And then they really don't often get the opportunity to spend much time on their own solution in those types of conversations. So one of the
Right.
things we try to do at JTA is as we're constantly building up a set of resources that the founders can point people to kind of educate themselves a little bit before they get on the phone, which has turned out to be pretty helpful.
Well, I mirror that. Like funding and all that's always been a challenge in this area, but it's definitely well needed. Like it's very much needed by everyone. But I want to turn to, American Arbitration Association. So your work there as vice president of the institute is putting together what? What's your charge there?
Well, it's delightfully ambiguous, although less so every day as we're kind of
Yeah.
working through our strategic plan. I mean, it's a new thing. It was founded last summer. So one of the things that we're doing right now is, of course, I'm supporting development and execution of our strategic plan, which includes
Mm.
prioritizing the big ideas, helping to map the Institute's approach to addressing them, against broader organizational goals of the AAA, which, as you can see and everybody knows, is really are incredibly powerful because mostly of the new leadership that we have under Bridget McCormick. As it's getting off the ground, we need to be shaping, obviously, our own operational framework. We need to identify where we can have the most impact in terms of a few key areas. So AI in alternative dispute resolution, the big area, of course. Can't can't avoid that one, but it's a big focus, obviously, for AAA as well, writ large. So, kind of the tech aspect of what they're doing. Which is most of it. Then also there's how to expand access to justice through alternative dispute resolution, which of course is something I'm super excited about because there are a lot of ways that people can get relief for their legal problems that don't involve litigating, and many types of matters probably shouldn't be in courts in the first place. On that note, I saw a LinkedIn post. I don't know if you saw it. It was a little while ago, of a guy who he runs an eviction clinic, an eviction defense clinic.
Hmm.
And he was in court representing like 30 of his clients one day, and the judge had 800 matters on the docket for one day. How is that justice by any definition, when you have 60 to 90 seconds to avoid getting evicted? So, um, hence the idea of technology. Maybe
Yeah.
more of this should be an alternative dispute resolution. Maybe it should be online. Maybe it should be, AI. I mean, who knows? But the current system is not working. So anyway, so then, we're going to be at the institute. There's a lot of really cool thought leadership that's coming out through, myself and my colleagues. There's identifying ways that we can work with court systems. We've got a really great program going with Suffolk, the ODR clinic, figuring out
Yay,
ways that
Suffolk.
yeah, I know. I'm so excited. I just asked when I could meet them. And then there's obviously the educational side of things and partnering with different entities within departments, I should say, within AAA to develop programs that, will be able to increase the amount of thought leadership that's out there, and AAA as the dominant voice in how we can leverage it to really kind of to change the game. I think what's really interesting is to see that, the AAA is already an innovation leader. It's a thought leader, and it's got also a thought leader, and it's also got, because it's a nonprofit, it has a different kind of voice in the arbitration and alternative dispute resolution kind of sector. And so, there's just a huge amount of opportunity for us to get out in front of a lot of things, like, working on the way we're going to talk about AI guidelines for arbitration, and, you know, should we be using? What kinds of tools should we be using in the process? So we're thinking really big. It's early days, but we're going to start executing on our 2025 plan, yesterday.
Well, those sound like ambitious plans, and I think ones that are definitely doable. I mean, if you look at where I live now, British Columbia, Shannon Salter, championed, um, you know,
Yeah.
alternative dispute resolution with technology, and has actually changed quite a bit how things work here, where it could be like point and click easy, so it can be done.
Mhm.
And I'm also a big fan of Bridget, and what she's doing is just really awesome stuff. And so I'm happy to see the two of you working together, and I'm really excited to see what you do.
I know. Well, we never know. We'll get up to some trouble maybe together. There's a lot of big ideas that we can still, are still sort of we're trying to figure out what order, I mean, not, what order we can do them in the Institute. I think a lot
Mm.
of it will also be kind of exploring and figuring out how we can identify specific systemic problems that we can address through our existing and potentially future channels. We've got the AAAI lab, which is kind of an area that contextualizes and brings to the fore the work that is being done in AI and in alternative dispute resolution at AAA and beyond. There's plenty of ideas to have strategic partnerships, strategic collaborations with other tech companies specifically. They of course think that JTA members are fantastic because they're already mission aligned in many ways, and so we're hoping to act as a resource for insight into the sector landscape and the industry trends, opportunities for impact, how we can have technology as a differentiator and that kind of thing. But that's one of the things that made me so excited about joining AAA, was that they really wanted to make sure that JTA would continue to be able to be a force in the market, and we definitely are still out there. Obviously, I'm talking to you right now. I mean, there's people asking us a lot of questions about what next for JTA, and how can we see some overlap. And I'm happy to report there will be much overlap.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I think that what you're doing is fantastic. If I could be of any help in any way, let me know. One thing I want to turn to in the time we have left is like a couple of questions I ask everyone that I get to, the pleasure of interviewing. And that's that, well, first off, with what you're doing, it's so amazing like how everything overlaps, like everything's aligned in terms of like JTA, and then you're working at AAA, only like three-letter acronym places do you work at.
I know.
Um,
Yeah, seems that
but
way.
but it all fits together. And so I know some people might be wondering, with everyone that I interview, they have so much going on. How do you keep it up in the air? Like, how do you juggle everything just from a human standpoint?
Mm. From a human standpoint, I make I don't have anything groundbreaking to say. I spend time. I try to make time to regroup, to get offline, to be in silence, whether it's like in nature or underwater or just quietly reading or something. I find that I really need that kind of time. I get so much out of um, connecting constantly with our community and with our ecosystem, that it doesn't really drain me in the way that other types of work might, I think. And I'm happy
Yeah.
to report that I finally gotten to that point in my life. And and I think that I mean, I have an incredible family that I spend a lot of time with. And that really helps ground me. I'm always planning my next travel adventure. That also helps a lot.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of dovetails with the last question I ask everyone, which is what makes it worthwhile for you? Like at the end of the day, after juggling all this stuff and doing some really interesting work, what makes it worthwhile for you?
Gosh, I think I would say it's two things. The first is the way it makes me feel, and I truly feel that the way I've kind of come roundabout to a place in my career where it is incredibly fulfilling to me personally. And so I get so much out of it. I mean, to me, JTA is a gift, truly. And I can credit Sonia Ebron, founder of Courtroom 5, for having come up with the idea and being like, you should lead it. And it's gotten me through sometimes when I'd really rather be focused on the good in the world than anything else. And so being able to work on these kinds of things, work with the kinds of people that I work with, just on a day-to-day basis, the really exciting and cool conversations I get to have, and brainstorming crazy ideas that actually sometimes come to fruition. I would say that's kind of the one side of thing, and the other side of thing is really seeing the impact. And for me, the impact isn't only the social impact, where we see people, truly being helped in the ways that we're nurturing, but also the way that the impact of the people themselves that we're supporting. So, at JTA, we're supporting founders who are, again, like, quite often out there, trying to survive. They don't have much of many people in their corner in many ways. So I love to provide that. I also really, really feel very strongly about supporting pro se litigants, and people who are unrepresented. I think that this is a problem that the legal industry has created, and it's our responsibility to do something about it. And so impacting, of course, the people themselves, that otherwise would not have as much access to justice in their legal problems, is a huge deal, and that kind of sustains me. But day to day, I don't talk to them as much as I do to the people that I'm providing help to, and it's a big reward for me.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Maya, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show and sharing some time with me.
Thank you so much, Tom. I mean, we would have the same conversation if we weren't being recorded, I'm sure, but I'd be asking you
Yeah.
questions about you too. So we'll
Well,
do
that's
that
why I
off the
like this
record.
format. I just get to ask you questions.
Yeah, right. Off
Um,
the record next time.
um, okay, well, for people that are listening and watching and they want to keep in touch with you and learn more, how would they do
Yeah.
that?
I would love to hear people's thoughts, reactions, agree, disagree, throw stones, anything like that. You can probably find me most easily on LinkedIn, or Blue Sky.
Well, fantastic. And for all of you watching, thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.